Hello, YouTube. This is my cat. This is Mona. She likes to get involved in everything, including the videos. So you may see her from time to time. Um, Howdy. I actually recorded the video you're about to see as an intro originally, and then realized, oh, this is actually pretty long. I think it's kind of like a video in and of itself. It's not really an intro. It's more of like a, how did I know I was trans video? And so I decided to chop it off of the intro and then like create a separate video. So this is basically the video describing how I came to understand my gender identity, where I am right now, that whole process of really self-discovery. I'll talk more about this in other videos, but this is kind of like the main story. So I wanted to share that with you today. I identify as transmasculine and use they pronouns right now. I am pre-T and pre-top surgery. And I've been on this path for quite some time. When I look back, and I think many people could probably relate to this, I remember having inklings of not feeling right in my own gender since I was very, very young. I didn't have any role models. I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. So I just sort of made do with who I was and what I had. Luckily, I came out as queer later, so I was able to align myself with the butch community. So I was able to experiment with my gender expression a lot more. Of course, my whole life I had always been definitely on the masculine side, definitely a tomboy. But, once I actually came out as queer when I was 17, I began to really feel much more comfortable experimenting with my gender and dressing much more masculine and cutting my hair and doing all those kinds of things that made me feel much more comfortable in my own skin. And that felt good for a while. Like, that really felt good for a while. But yeah, when I do look back when I was a kid, I always did like to play with boys' toys, that kind of thing. I always took on male roles when I played with kids at school. I loved playing with my brother and other boys in the neighborhood. But I was always very sad about that because when they would wrestle, I was just much physically weaker than them. So I would get pummeled. So that sucked. But I did like playing with them. That was sort of my inclination, was to play with them. I like doing things like my dad was in construction and he always wanted to bring my brother to the construction site. My brother never had any interest, but I was dying to go to the construction site with my dad. I was dying to go. And he never took me, but I was always really interested in that. So there's all these signs throughout my life, and as I grew up, I always just felt uncomfortable aligning myself with girls. Now, I wouldn't say that I thought that I was a boy. I never had that experience. A lot of people have that experience, but I never had that experience. I never thought I was a boy. I just liked doing boy things. But I did have a fantasy world that I kind of escaped to. Maybe starting when I was 11, I developed this fantasy world where in this fantasy world there was several people involved, but when I would play out these sort of scenarios in my head, I always played the boy role. I tried to play the girl role a little bit, but it just never felt as aligned as the boy role did. So there's just a lot of incidents throughout my history that I could look to show that this has been an issue for a very long time. Hello, I'm popping in from the future. I just want to say one thing. So all of these things I'm talking about that happened in my past, when they were happening, I had no idea what it all meant. I just knew that I felt uncomfortable at times, or I knew that I liked to play with boys. I didn't know that it meant that I actually didn't align with my gender identity. That only became clear to me as an adult. Looking back, I can see that. But at the time, I guess I just want to differentiate because I know that a lot of kids these days are having these experiences and are consciously aware in the moment that they are not the gender assigned to them. And that was definitely not my experience. It's only looking back that I start putting things into place. So I just wanted to share that. Okay, let's go back to the past. But like I said, I started, I came out as queer and I aligned with dykes, and that was really great. And I had issues along the way, but I kind of just assumed that was part of what it was like being a queer woman. People always questioning if I was male or female, having issues in bathrooms, wanting to wear more masculine clothes. I just kind of thought that all that was part of just being a queer woman, and that was just part of what I had to deal with. It was later on, at some point, maybe I think I was in my late 20s, that I had my first thought that, something might be going on with my gender. I might need to explore this. And that was the first time I was in a community where like the trans stuff was talked about. Growing up, I didn't have any trans people in my life. There was no one, not even in the media really to look up to. It was really when I started grad school that I entered a community where gender stuff was more talked about and present. And once I kind of encountered that, I remember one specific day where I was in class and I made a comment to the effect of I need to start looking at my gender. And that was the end of that. I didn't talk about it or think about it again. So several years later, I still had the internal experience of feeling out of place with females a lot in like all female spaces. I always felt a little bit uncomfortable, like I didn't quite feel like I belonged there, but I didn't really understand why. It just didn't quite feel right. And then the big incident for me that clued me into there being something wrong that I needed to address was when a good friend of mine 2.5 years ago asked me to be her maid of honor at her wedding and wanted me to wear a pink dress. And I know it's funny. It's funny. It's funny. But it's true. I thought that I would be able to pull it off because when I was younger, I was in a couple of weddings and I wore dresses and it was kind of like drag to me at the time. And it was fun to sort of express my femininity because I still have feminine aspects of myself that I got to express by wearing some feminine clothes once in a while. And so it wasn't a big deal in the past. Like this was like 10 years prior to, wear the dress, go to the wedding. It wasn't that big a deal. I didn't like it, but it just didn't rock my world. But when I was asked by this friend 2.5 years ago, immediately I thought, I didn't like the idea, but I thought I could do this. I've done it before. It's not a big deal. I'll support my friend. I'll be fine. But along the way, I finally got to sort of look at myself from an outside perspective. I saw that all of my clothes were men's clothes. Like I had consciously thrown out female clothes. I wore men's deodorant. I used male hair products. Like I had a male haircut. Like everything in my life was masculine, was male. And here I am looking at pictures of dresses that are like these pink dresses, and I was just like, I can't do this. This doesn't. I can't do this anymore. Like I can't pretend for one day put this on because it just doesn't align with who I am. And when I got to that point where I recognized that it didn't align with who I was, that's when I started noticing, like, I've got to start looking at this gender thing and start figuring out what's going on here. And, I think it was okay up until that point because, again, I was in the queer community. I identified as queer. I live in a very, very liberal place where really anything goes. And I, even if I identified as female, which I did for a long time, even though I dressed male and looked like more boyish, I didn't get questioned. It was acceptable. So I was never really socially pushed to look at my gender identity until the moment that this happened with my friend. And it woke me up to what I was not willing to recognize or look at myself. After that whole incident happened, I started to go to gender therapy and began to unpack the feelings and start talking about some of this stuff. And I also joined a gender support group. And those things were really helpful. And I started to contact some trans friends that I had and have conversations with them. And all of those things were very, very helpful. And what started happening was I began to start noticing the level of dysphoria that existed in me that I didn't look at before. And I think that happened because shortly after this wedding, I got into a relationship. And I hadn't been dating for a long time. And here I am now in this intimate relationship, and I'm exploring gender, and I began to really notice how, like, I didn't feel good in my body. Like, I noticed that there was an enormous amount of chest dysphoria. I just was distraught about it. And it got worse over time. It got more and more intense. It was very hard to be with my partner because of that issue. I had bottom dysphoria. That was another issue that started coming up. So the dysphoria began to reveal itself. It was kind of facing everything all at once. It was all just kind of coming to the surface. So I guess what I want to really say about this is I was having all these feelings and I didn't really know what it meant, but I knew that like in my body I didn't feel good. At one point, I remember I had this moment with my partner where I said to her, my brain thinks my body is male. And that's the explanation I had for my dysphoria. And that moment was really probably the first moment where I started recognizing, like, or admitting out loud that there was part of me that actually identified as male. And that was the first way I was able to start understanding why I was having the feelings that I was having. Over time, I started to be able to recognize, like, oh, actually, it's not necessarily just my brain. It's actually, there's a lot more to this that I actually don't, see myself as female. I didn't know what I saw myself as, but I didn't see myself as female. And so that was an interesting moment. That was about 2 years ago that happened. And so all of the support I was getting was very, very helpful. And the top dysphoria was so intense that I finally started binding. And that was really, really great. The experience of like putting on a binder and then putting on clothes and feeling aligned with myself was very unique. And I remember that moment when I saw myself in the mirror. I felt just so good, and just it was like finally seeing who I am reflected back. And that was a big moment as well. So I used to bind just on the weekends, and then I started binding every day. It felt really good, and then I never stopped. And so it's been almost 2 years that I've been binding every day, and have no intention to stop until I have top surgery. Some of the other dysphoria still exists, but right now I think the chest dysphoria is the worst, and so it's just like at the forefront of my mind. So that's kind of where things are right now. And I guess what I want to be clear about is that I was just following my feelings. Like when I was younger, I hated my hair, so I cut my hair off. I hated my clothes, so I started wearing male clothes. I started having dysphoria around my chest, and so I wore a binder. I never heard the word trans and like attached myself to it and then did all of these things because I had this identity. It was not at all that. In fact, it was just I had an emotional experience around something, and so that I did the thing to make it better. And it was only after kind of doing this multiple times, and then finally having to look at myself that I realized, oh, actually, everything I'm doing actually adds up to what the word trans means. So I guess that's what I am. But it took a long time to get there. Like I did not want to identify as trans. And I was in denial about it, even though like it was so clear. I was in really deep denial about it for a long time. It's been a very intense process. I really was hesitant about taking steps forward in this journey because I just, for a very long time, had a lot of internalized transphobia. Didn't really believe that I should have to change my body to alleviate the dysphoria. I really believed I needed to just deal with it. Other thoughts like maybe I'm really just a butch dyke and I need to embrace that identity. I had a lot of different thoughts, but I never identified as a butch dyke. That was never an identity for me, and so I had a lot of stuff I needed to work through. I went to this really great retreat this summer, and that's what really changed everything. And I talk about this in another video, but I, got to hang out with other trans masculine and trans men, and meditate and journal and listen to people share and share myself, and it was just a really great experience because I finally got to like take space to really dedicate time to look at this stuff. By the end of that retreat that I finally recognized I want to have top surgery, I'm ready for this. And so I came home and I made a consultation. Long story short, my top surgery is scheduled for January 4th, so that's in a few weeks. Really excited about it. But it took a long time to get there. And like I said, it's in another video. But yeah, where I am right now is I've got top surgery coming up in a few weeks. I'm feeling really stoked. I've been taking really good care of myself physically, working out, eating well, just to try to be in the best shape for top surgery. I'm still in therapy, not gender therapist, but I do deal with gender in therapy. I still go to the trans support group, and have a lot more trans people in my community now, so I have people to talk to. And it's been great. And of course, I love YouTube videos, and I've gotten so much out of watching them over the years. So yeah, that's where things are right now. And the future, I'm not sure really what it holds. I'm kind of taking things like as a one day at a time sort of philosophy. I think about taking tea. I have a tentative appointment with my doctor at the end of January to talk about it, but I'm not exactly sure. I have a lot of hesitations around it, so that's a separate topic, but it's something that I'm thinking about and don't really know what I want to do about just yet. Right now, the surgery feels like absolutely the right thing, and so that's the direction I'm going in. Hi again. Yes, so that was the end. I hope that was helpful. I really just wanted to talk about my journey to understanding my gender identity. It's been a long, 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 long one, and hopefully that helps you to understand yourself. And if you have questions, please ask. Please post comments. We want to have a conversation. So, like, use this space as a place to like talk about what's going on for you. If you have questions, if you want to like banter, like let's get into it. Like that's what this is about. I could not have gotten here without people talking to me and with me for years now, and if I could do that for anybody, I would love to. So yes, thank you for watching. I'll be back soon. This is my other cat. That was my other cat, Pickle. I just want to make sure she got a proper introduction because Mona did. So